Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. This is our 49th episode, and as we teeter towards half a century, we come to you with a very special entry. Take that with a grain of salt. As we talk about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, a prequel entry that Lord Uther has been talking about for 49 episodes so far, 48 episodes so far. In this 49th one, we finally get to address the elephant in the clone. But before we jump in to our dissection of this movie, let's turn it over to Jedi Master Psyllium Maas for some background and information on Episode 2.
Thank you, Jedi Masters, Urza Master, and Lord Uther. And thanks, Graying Jedi fans at home. Yes, this is our second big screen Star Wars episode in the Graying Jedi firmament, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Released on May 16th, 2002. It was budgeted at the time for $115 million. And while that seems like a penny-pinching budget in today's dollars, back then, films that were actually upfront in triple-digit budgets, they were not quite as prominent. Studios, they like to roll the dice with 20, 30, 40 million dollars on the table. But this one, 20th Century Fox said, "Hey, it's Star Wars. We're going all in." The film grossed $310 million in the U.S., and overall globally it grossed $649 million. It was not the highest grossing in the saga, nor was it the lowest, and I'm sure we'll cover the lowest going forward. Back then, there was no such thing as a billion-dollar franchise. We had not yet hit those heights. So over $500 million and heading close, inching towards 700 million is still quite a feat. The director, obviously, George Lucas. Don't forget, in the original trilogy, he only directed one picture. He used Irwin Kershner and Richard Marquand as sort of his proxies, but he was never actually credited as director. He was instead a producer with a very strong hand. But for the prequel trilogy, no one was prying him out from behind the camera. So George, this is his actual third Star Wars film as a director, and the second in this trilogy overall. And it's the only prequel trilogy film where he took on a co-writer. He brought on Jonathan Hales to work with him. Jonathan Hales worked on 6 episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicle for George Lucas when they were doing that television show. You might remember it from 1992 to 1994. Sean Patrick Flannery and a cast of hundreds would take you through historical, global, and U.S. history lessons, with Indiana Jones popping up like Forrest Gump or Woody Allen's Zelig to witness the birth of jazz, or the Pancho Villa raids, or so on and so forth. And Jonathan Hales worked on 6 episodes for him, so that's how they had a relationship. He also, curiously enough, wrote the story for, but ended up not getting the final script for, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's The Scorpion King, which was a spin-off picture. And I actually went out in theaters knowing Jonathan Hales had worked on it. I was trying to discern any clues I could get. How would his Attack of the Clones work by looking at The Scorpion King? I have to say, it's been a very long time since I revisited that particular franchise. I don't remember loathing it. I also don't remember it having any meaningful impact on my life whatsoever. But it was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and he graduated quickly from loincloths to more meat and potatoes action fare as time went on. A lot of our old favorites make return appearances here in Episode 2. Now we have top billed Ewan McGregor, with Liam Neeson no longer as Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. We have Natalie Portman We have Ian McDermott as the devious Chancellor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious. We have Samuel L. Jackson. We have Frank Oz returning to voice Yoda. We have Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker as our lovable droids, C-3PO and R2-D2. We have Ahmed Best returning as everyone's most misunderstood Gungan, Jar Jar Binks, Senator Binks now, or Senator Proxy. We have Pernilla August, Anakin's mom, Shmi, and we even have Oliver Ford Davies as the Naboo administrator who famously uttered the line, "A communications disruption can only mean one thing, invasion." And we had some new faces. It wasn't just a greatest hits package. We had Tamura Morrison as the inspiration for all clones going forward and the chief body material from which all clones were drawn from, Jango Fett. We had Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa. We had Daniel Logan as a young, unaltered Boba Fett, allowed to grow at a normal rate and not be accelerated. We had Joel Edgerton playing Uncle Owen. And we even had Rose Byrne in an early role as one of Padme's handmaidens. But of course, the biggest casting change was the aging up of 10 years for the character. No longer did we have Jake Lloyd as a frisky 10-year-old pod racer from Tatooine, but we now have a 20-year-old Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. Hayden Christensen actually had a very small role in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which is where I first saw him. And prior to this, he had done a film with Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. I think it was called Life as a House, where he played a goth teen who didn't like the new living arrangements as his family, his new blended family, tried to build a house together. And I admit, I went and saw Life as a House just to see how Hayden Christensen was going to do in Attack of the Clones. So I was keen for tea leaves to read in the run-up to Episode 2. The picture was shot almost exclusively in Fox Studios Australia in Sydney, so they shot this one down under. They also had brief stops in Tunisia for Tatooine and Spain and Italy for Naboo. It was one of the first movies of the era ever shot on high-definition digital 24 frames a second. And that was because they had so many special effects, almost twice those of The Phantom Menace. And that Phantom Menace had just been released 3 years earlier. ILM and their technicians were truly put to the test in this one. And so this was one of those first films that shot not on 35 millimeter or 70 millimeter grainy film, but high-def digital. And it was the first Star Wars film that was outgrossed in its year of release. And that's because the year 2002 was loaded. It actually came in third in the box office overall. Don't forget, at $310 million in the US. Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man was the top grossing film that year and that summer. And it came out about 2 weeks before Attack of the Clones. So it had a head start and a head of steam. And Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which came about 5 months after
Take your time. We're in no rush.
It is Attack of the Clones.
It is Attack of the Clones, so yeah.
I will say, I remember seeing Attack of the Clones in the theater, and I saw Two Towers in the theater, and I can tell you there's a clear winner betwixt the two. Even though the Two Towers is like 3 hours long, and I went to see it with my grandma, and she fell asleep during the Battle of Helm's Deep, by the way, which is not a quiet, comforting sounding battle. So, I loved Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Attack of the Clones. But I do remember, because I was a kid at the time, and then since y'all were adults, I'll take the lead on this, because this is definitely like the prequels are aimed at my generation as being our generation's Star Wars. That was the ambition of it for sure. And I think a lot of folks who saw the Phantom Menace of my generation were super pumped for Attack of the Clones, and most of that is because we felt pretty let down by the Phantom Menace not being as, shall we say, I don't know, as BA as the Phantom Menace could have been. We loved Darth Maul, hated Jar Jar Binks. And when we got to Phantom Menace, I think that, excuse me, Attack of the Clones, I think, we were hoping for a different movie. So, the problem with this movie is we really get two different storylines. We get the storyline of Obi-Wan and of the Separatists and the droid army and Count Dooku, and it's set up to be like pretty intense, very, very kind of dark, brooding. The dark side is growing in might and power. We get kind of some fantastic fights, including with Yoda and Count Dooku, the reveal of the Death Star plans. A lot of good stuff going on here. But we also have half of this movie that is a very awkward romance that does not really play that well. Now, Hayden Christensen, to his credit, outside of the scenes with Padme, does a great job. I mean, for a young actor with poor dialogue in many cases, really just kind of works. Like the car chase scene when they're going after the bounty hunter in the beginning comes off okay. Just comes off as kind of a kid, which, okay, I'll buy it. But then, and this is what really irked me, is we get this, and we all knew that Padme was much older than Anakin. He just comes off as such a creep. And so, I don't know, just icky. I just watching it again, and it was hard to get through. This is by far, of the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, my least favorite. Whereas the original trilogy, I loved the second one. Return of the Jedi could not stand up to Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion. And I loved Return of the Jedi. But Attack of the Clones, really half of the movie is great. The Obi-Wan stuff, when he goes and meets Jango and the whole clone army thing. I don't like that Sifo Dyas is just like a typo, and they just sort of rolled with it because it's too late in production to correct. Or maybe that's an urban legend, and it should have been Sidious. I would have liked that quite a bit more. I hope that they do something with that. I was hoping maybe Acolyte could speak to Sifo Dyas, or a show like that. But there's good stuff there. The whole chase scene, the space battle with Slave One, and a lot of the Geonosis fighting was great. That even like the Deus Ex Machina, when all the Jedi show up and then they promptly kill off like 3/4 of them and have to be saved by the clones. I was all well and good with most of that. But a lot of the exchanges between Padme and Anakin just felt really... The Tatooine stuff was okay. Except the big emotional reveal at the end when you get this, he's turning to the dark side. It just comes off inauthentic, and I mean I get he's supposed to have this emotional break, and he goes off and just slaughters a whole village. cool, but somehow that's not his like complete transition to the dark side. Like that feels emotionally very heavy, and yet he just sort of comes back, and Padme's like, "So what? You killed a bunch of savages." Like, really? Like, come on. He just told you he murdered an entire village of sand people, which, now, granted, Padme has no concept of what sand people are. She's just been told by Lars that they're basically monsters and animals, and she's like, well, I don't know. Okay, cool. Like, they're not really people. Again, we're in this vein of like, ugh. That's just like, I know it's a modern lens maybe to look back, but even at the time, it's like, really? Like they're animals. They're not really people. They just grunt. This feels a little racist, but everything about that, just like Padme is just like, well, okay, let's just move on. Like, I guess, and I know Psyllium Maas, I know you're about to jump on this. I know she's kind of in that mode of, oh shit, like, oh, what do you say? What do you say if somebody just slaughtered a village and now they're admitting it to you? I don't know. It just didn't sell with me. So that's I feel like it's a tale of two films here.
Real quick before Lord Uther jumps in, I want to give credit to Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and we couldn't have known this in 2002, but we definitely know it in 2024. The idea of expanding and deepening the Tusken Raiders as characters, I think, is in direct response to possibly some of these vibes you're picking up here. And I think now, watching it in hindsight, it lands differently and with a little more force now. Obviously, it should have happened when we saw it the first time, but by knowing now about the Tuskens and their family structure and their hierarchical structure and how Boba Fett ends up defending them against the Pikes and so forth, when I rescreened it there was more impact, I think, than upon initial viewing, and that's not a good thing when you need something to backstop it. But in the same breath, I appreciate the backstopping because I think it now gives us a little more texture and feel in the sequence you're describing.
Yeah. The George Lucas cannot write love dialogue at all. Again, we know where we know where he wants to go with Anakin, but it all comes off as desperate. He's so desperate to turn Anakin into a bad guy, or for you to understand as the viewer that he's going to go to the dark side, that he's got all this clunky, emotionally conflicted dialogue that just doesn't come off right, and which kind of ruined Hayden Christensen's career for a little while. I mean, I think he was slightly ruined after this, and thank goodness we're getting redemption. To Psyllium Maas's credit, we're getting some of that redemption, especially with what we saw in Ahsoka. The Sifo Dyas thing, so that was one of my first questions. I didn't know that was a typo, if that is the case, because my first question is, who is Sifo Dyas? I always wondered that. Go ahead.
Answer to this, gentlemen, and it's just that perhaps some of those mysteries of the Force haven't been revealed to you. Again, we're going to talk backstopping for a second here. Sifo Dyas was meant to be an enigmatic figure. I do believe that, although amusing, that Urza Master's thing on the typo is just that, an urban legend. In any event, the ordering of the clone army and him as an actual character have been explored in Dave Filoni's Tales of the Jedi, which also featured the episode with Bryce Dallas Howard as Yaddle. Like, they're very explicit. Some of the things that come up in this film are not only addressed, but like they are tied up with a bow, and that there will not be any questions going forward. Like, how did those records of Kamino get erased? We see Count Dooku erasing them from the Jedi archives. like literally. Like, so whether that's a little on the nose for fans or not, they've gone back in. So yes, Sifo Dyas is a character. Sifo Dyas is a person. All of that was a little cluttered and not to its credit in this film. But once again, with the backstopping, I encourage you and all of our Graying Jedi fans to seek out Tales of the Jedi from Dave Filoni, which are a series of animated short.
Well, let's help our
And that's
right. Let's help our fans out a little bit here. Here's my question. So, to me, creating a clone army is a Jedi Council call, which, quite frankly, to me seems to go against the Jedi Code a little bit, possibly. So, what's the explanation for making the clone army? Do you know that? Like, why they let Sifo Dyas make that call? Let the Graying Jedi be the ones that gets all the information out to the millions and millions of fans out there about this whole Sifo Dyas.
Well, and again,
ordering
he and Dooku, as this comes forward, he and Dooku were very tight, very close, almost like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, or Obi-Wan and Anakin. Like, they weren't Padawan master, but they were fellow Jedi Knights and peers. And when Dooku was still part of the council, he instructed Sifo Dyas to start the order. This thing got rolling. This plan was set into motion 30, 40, 50 years before the events you see in the film. Because that's how long it took them.
Oh, so this is what we should have seen in the Acolyte. Got it. Okay,
yes.
Go ahead, keep going.
Well, no, because that had nothing to do with that particular tale. But, so yes, this thing was set in motion. This was a deep long game being played by the Sith, by so forth, Dooku working with Palpatine, aka Sidious, and so forth. So he manipulated Sifo Dyas into doing it, and then they basically offed him once you see it in classic crime stories. You send the guy to deliver the drugs, and then you kill the guy who delivered the drugs, and so there's nothing that ties you to him. That's basically, in a nutshell, what happened to Sifo Dyas. He's sort of a red herring, but he's very much a part of the narrative in the sense that misbelieving that Dooku's intentions come from the full council, he goes ahead and gets this ball rolling, and then they off him, off camera, of course, because we don't see him. And the Kaminoans know no better and just start churning out replicas of Jango over and over.
So, in my opinion, here's what saves this entire movie. It's Ewan McGregor, and it's his storyline as a detective Jedi, which is what, and I know I'm going back to referencing the Acolyte, but that was my whole hope for Saul, was there's actually a good story behind his detective work, and kind of almost, it's a bad comparison, but whatever. It's almost like a Batman-y type feel. Like, that's the Batman that I really liked in the Robert Pattinson version, is that he is really a detective first and someone who kicks rear end second, in a sense. And that's what I liked about this Obi-Wan, even though it's cheesy that the little android or little droid is going to fly back to the assassin. I mean, there's no self-destruct or auto-destruct on that thing when it can't carry out its orders. But Ewan McGregor, to me, saves the entire thing, which I want to make another point. Where does Alec Guinness end and Ewan McGregor begin in terms of Obi-Wan? Because it's seamless. And I think that's how I felt about Solo. I thought Solo was a great movie. I'm drawing a quick blank on Adrian, the guy who played Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich.
Yeah, thank you. So, I thought that was good, too, which gives me hope that Sebastian Sands can take up the Luke Skywalker mantle at some point. That's still my ultimate goal. But, really, Ewan McGregor, he's Obi Wan Kenobi. Like, that's what saves almost this entire thing, along with some of the lightsaber battles, especially at the end. All of that tends to work. It's just the love story. It's almost like you could cut out that entire piece. And I always said, too, that I thought everything should have started with Attack of the Clones, in a sense. Never should have had Phantom Menace, and the third movie should be Vader hunting down Jedi, which is what I hope we get in the series at some point, is just some of that. But and almost the end of the movie almost feels rushed too. Like there's this big battle that to me should have kept going. Seems to only last for a few minutes in terms of clones versus droids and everything, and then these quick 2 lightsaber battles, and we're out. Now they're getting married. He's got this arm, Anakin, and then that's it. All right.
Yeah, it felt like they didn't know how to end the movie or when to end the movie. Like they were scared it was going to have too much runtime, so they just cut like a whole act out of the film. And I understand like it's supposed to bridge into the Clone Wars, and that was probably planned at the time to do a cartoon Clone Wars, or maybe there was some other similar plan. But I think of the 2 biggest weaknesses of this movie is the love story not working. I think period. It feels very manipulative. However, I have a point to make about that. And then the whole idea that this begins the Clone Wars are like no. Sorry, I don't buy it. It's not great to have a giant battle and then just, all right, we're at war now, fellas. Like, no. Now, I will say that, we pick up in a battle in the next movie. So not to jump ahead to episode 3, but but the love story, now I've always felt, and I know this has been floating around the internet, and I really like this fan theory, so I've kind of adopted parts of it. But I've always felt that the whole love arrangement between Padme and Anakin never felt very realistic. He's quite a bit younger. He's really not like... He's always like sort of almost blowing up on her and almost like yelling at her and mistreating her, and yet she's just like, oh, I love you. And then, but she like doesn't want to fall in love, but wants to spend time with him. And then like all of a sudden in the last movie, I'm pregnant and we're all in love and blah, blah, blah. And my heart's broken because you turned to the dark side. Now I'm dead. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. Except if you take Anakin as having so much dark side power that he is using the Force to manipulate her, and in so doing is slowly draining her life force away from her the whole time. So his influence through the Force via the dark side is to essentially make her fall in love with him, to the point that, when her body or her mind has had enough on again jumping ahead to episode 3, that he not only breaks her spirit and her mind, but that whole love connection thing just kills her, and her life force is essentially run out because he's been using the Force to sustain this love that just isn't real. I think that actually, like, if that's canon, if that's somehow explained in canon at some point, that really could redeem a lot of these original movies and would be pretty compelling storytelling.
So let me tell you how, to me, that makes Return of the Jedi actually better. Because if it was unknowing, then his turn back to the light would make, at the end of Return of the Jedi, then that makes sense. Now I buy that. Because I told you, I really don't like the redemption arc a lot. I really don't like it that much. And that was my whole issue with Kylo Ren, right? Because you should have stayed. There's no reason for him, in my opinion, to come back to the light, and would have made that character better. But if that's the case, and it's unknowing that he was doing that, I can see him wanting and turning back at the end. If he knew what he was doing, then that still kills the end of Return of the Jedi for me personally in terms of him turning back. But, man, that makes Return of the Jedi perfect. Like, that works for me. That works for me.
Gentlemen on the council, respectfully, I think those are fantastic ideas. I really do. But I think you're both nuts. I think the simplest explanation, and I speak to this as a writer, is it's very hard in your 50s and 60s and 70s, and I will speak for other writers on this, to try and create organic, authentic teenagers in love dialogue. I mean, I'm sorry, I could not write right now, as skilled as I might believe myself to be, I could not probably write something that sounds authentic now. I might be able to recreate my youth, but that's not where today's audiences are and probably will never go again. So what we had was two white older men trying to reconjure what teenagers might do, and they just simply, as you say, it was awkward, because that's and George Lucas has gone on record saying that was the hardest thing for him to write. It's much easier to do the political machinations and the detective twists and even the stuff about mythology and midichlorians and so forth than it was to try to convincingly portray, you know, a 20-year-old Jedi and a 24, 25, 26-year-old senator. That being said, and there's a couple of key points I want to do to contrast my opinion on Attack of the Clones versus the rest of the councils. I don't see it as a weakness. I think to Lord Uther's point, I think that they were always boxed in by, as you say, the end point. Anakin needs to go to the dark side. So every decision that was made in this character, from the first time you meet him to the end of Revenge of the Sith, there's no room for that character to go beyond the boundaries. He can't really step outside the lines. He can't do something original or unexpected because, as you say, we know exactly where he has to go. And I think creatively, I think that does put you in a box where all of your decisions are like, well, yeah, I can't make him more, you know, nuanced and have shadings like we did Ahsoka, or even, you know, Saul in The Acolyte. Like, I can't bring that level because in the end, you know, Anakin equals bad. Like, that's what we're supposed to come from it. And so I think just by the nature of the story they were trying to tell, just inherently they were going to have problems being able to give us a three-dimensional, full-bodied character because his destiny had been pre-written. And it was just a matter of what are the details that finally cause him to become Darth Vader, which is what we were all hungering for anyway. What is it? What is it? He started off as this cute kid with moxie, and then how does he get there? But it doesn't really, as a writer, as an author, you don't really, there's not much in the toolbox that you can do beyond just getting him, you know, connecting dots, point A to point B to point C. That being said, we talk about Hayden Christensen's performances in the Obi Wan Kenobi miniseries and Ahsoka. And yes, the current stewards of Star Wars, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, have done an epic job of giving Anakin additional moments and depth and shadings. And I just think of the training duel in Obi Wan Kenobi between a de-aged Hayden Christensen and Anakin. And you learn more in that one lesson, which is just a side story in the miniseries, if you will. It's not, you know, it's just something to sort of flash back and illustrate character. That's as good as anything in this film, this entire picture, when they're running around as Jedi Master and Padawan. And they did that in 6 minutes in the Kenobi miniseries. So I will admit, watching this, rewatching it now, with, again, all of that backstopping, it informs Hayden Christensen's performance. I'm not disagreeing with your critiques of what we saw in 2002. I'm just saying now it goes down smoother based on what I know about that character and how he approached it as an actor. And so I'm more comfortable with it. It doesn't grate on me like broken glass or nails on a chalkboard, as some people might have felt, you know, back then. The other thing I want to talk about is John Williams' score. John Williams, of course, is the maestro. And in fact, graying Jedi fans and music, cinema music fans, and anyone who's ever heard a John Williams score and been inspired by it, there is a brand new documentary. It will be on Disney Plus beginning November 1st of this year. It is produced by Steven Spielberg and Ron Howard. It is called Music by John Williams. And I absolutely encourage all of you to check out the behind the scenes of the creation of some of the most memorable scores of our lifetime, from Jaws to Close Encounters to Indiana Jones to Star Wars to E.T. to Jurassic Park to Harry Potter, and the list goes on, Superman. I mean, you really do need to see it, and part of his brilliance is very much on evidence here, because for a while the only thing carrying this love story is John Williams' love theme, which played upon in its if you just were to take the soundtrack that I obviously adore, and you play that theme, it sounds epic and big, and it sounds like something out of Dr. Zhivago, or something from the the late 60s, like this big, powerful, soaring romance. And it actually fills in some emotional character that isn't present on screen or in the writing. But it's Williams' score that at least makes you halfway go with them to say, okay, fine, these two crazy kids, they're in love. And I believe it's John Williams' specific theme for this. And I also love what he does here is he recontextualizes classic themes in this film. So for example, the standout theme in Phantom Menace, of course, is Duel of the Fates. Just an epic, action-y, lightsaber-y chase scene score music that once you've heard a few notes of it, you can't get it out of your head. Well, here he plays it, but he doesn't play it in the same context as he did in Phantom Menace when they were dueling Darth Maul and running through the Palace of Theed and Naboo. Here, it's when Anakin's on a speeder bike going off to look for his mother and conversing with Jawas. And you thrill when you hear it. You hear those notes and go, oh, it's Duel of the Fates, I love this. And it sort of sets the emotional temperature, but it's a completely different setting than he played with it. And it works. It works in this context just as easily as it did in the first film. And I also think he does that with the Imperial March. Don't forget, at the end of this picture, as you're talking about it, we have modified Star Destroyers and thousands upon thousands of clone troopers who vaguely resemble Generation 1 stormtroopers marching in tune into these ships to go off to fight against the Separatists. And don't forget, according to this film's mythology, the Separatists are the bad guys. They're the ones trying to tear the Republic apart, led by Count Dooku. So we've been taught that the Separatists are the bad guys in this scenario, meaning the Republic and their clone army are the good guys. And yet, what are they doing? They're playing the Imperial March, and they're focusing on Bail Organa's unease at what he's witnessing. And John Williams' score is announcing to you, hey guys, pay attention. These are the bad guys, really. And it's, telegraphing it, and it may seem obvious, but it's a brilliant, because these are supposed to be the good guys. These are supposed to be the guys we're rooting for. And instead we're hearing this march of evil that we've long associated with the Empire and Darth Vader, who has still yet to enter center stage. So hats off to the maestro John Williams. Like I have over 60 of his scores, and I've never seen once, even in pictures where they were lesser scores, where I feel like he's phoned it in. But he really went above and beyond here with Attack of the Clones to sell us on the romance and to take themes that we'd already fallen in love with and give them new meanings and new context for it. And it just makes for a rewarding experience.
Well, gentlemen, Episode 2 deserves a Kyber Crystal rating. And I know we may not always agree, but I think we can agree that the additional canon we have now has done some kind things with this film. Whether you loved it originally or hated it, it's definitely been fleshed out a bit more and certainly drives that engine in the Star Wars Disney continuum. Psyllium Maas, let's start with you. How do you feel now about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones?
My belief and faith in the Force is unwavering. I am the Force is with me. I have a green Jedi holocron here, and so we're going to go with that. Full confession, it's actually just the old Pyramex Rubik's Cube knockoff. But it sure looks like a holocron, doesn't it? And it's green, and we're going with that for Attack of the Clones. You will not hear me say a bad thing overall on the films, because the films, again, were literally my lifeblood. I saw this one in theaters several times, just like I've seen all the others that came before and after. I acknowledge that it is imperfect, and that its imperfections, some of which have been smoothed out over time and some of which still exist. I don't believe George Lucas and Jonathan Hales successfully gave us that young romance that we could have seen. And I don't know, short of trying to farm that out to young writers at the time, or somebody, whoever's hip, Quentin Tarantino. I don't know that they could have. I don't know that they could have pulled that off necessarily theirs. And I think they were hamstrung overall by saying, well, these two have to fall in love, because then, like I said, it didn't feel like, and I believe Uther and Urza both articulated this well, the relationship did not feel organic. It just felt like it was dictated, by destiny. Ergo, it doesn't have the same, you don't feel the swells in your chest of, oh God, I've been there. I've fallen in love just like that. I remember those days. Only John Williams' score at the time could really have tried to communicate that, and he did it. He did a noble job.
You, my friend, have fell in love like that
Okay.
many times back in the day. I can speak from experience. Go Hilltoppers. Anyway, I would have paid money for Quentin Tarantino to write the love dialogue, just like I would have paid money for David Lynch to have directed Return of the Jedi, because we probably would have had a lot of similarities in terms of the love stories for both of those. So just put that in your kyber crystal and ignite it, is the way I look at that. With that being said, because I loved the Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan so much, I'm going to go, and I think I've used them before, but that's okay, I'm going to use them again. Blue Batman, because of the detective angle, the dialogue, the love dialogue obviously takes away from it. The lightsaber battles were great. That all that, and again, I think we agreed, kind of too short. A good setup for the next episode that we're going to wind up reviewing soon. But Quentin Tarantino, could you maybe just write a spec of that love story and post it online somewhere? I would buy that for $1.
I have to say, my kyber crystal rating fluctuates while I'm watching this now. And I wanted to do a mixture, but I think after talking it through, as often we do, it's ameliorated some, and I'm going to give Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones a Frozen soundtrack blue kyber crystal. I was leaning towards a blue-red mix because I feel like the love story part is so terrible. But I still hook onto that fan theory. I agree. The bit about writers not being able to write a love story, and I know what Lucas said, and that's 100% what it is. But as we have seen with later releases from the Star Wars universe, this could easily be changed. And that could be explained away, which to me would greatly redeem this movie, really improve the original trilogy, and is something they should absolutely find a way to do, because while this movie still wouldn't be perfect, and the performances wouldn't be perfect from Hayden Christensen in this or the next movie, I do think it would make it so much better. Not only that, but I do think there's still a lot that Anakin Skywalker could do with Hayden Christensen being still alive, and plenty of extra canon to explore, not the least of which being the Nether Realm, in which we know Anakin thrives via Ahsoka. And I expect to see more Hayden Christensen in Ahsoka Season 2. But until that time comes, we here at the Graying Jedi podcast will leave, as we always do, from the galaxy far, far away, with a very stern, may the Force be with you.